Talked about Chinese dynasties and how they went through these cycles, and we're going to talk about the cycles right now, okay? And I want to review these with you to make sure you understand them. And let's take a look at the board. Now at the board, we see the Chinese history. Let's think about it like this: looking at Chinese history as periods of unity and disunity. What I mean by unity and disunity is that at some point they were united, usually by force, and then at other points the empire would fall apart, and then the cycle would begin again. But think of Chinese history as periods of unity and disunity, periods of China being together, then China being separate. And it repeats this cycle over and over again. Now, it is a cycle. Even the Chinese scholars at their time recognized this cycle. Now, what usually happens is this. It usually starts off with a cycle, as we discussed yesterday, with the China being unified by force. Okay, what I mean by force is that somebody usually came in and invaded it, put it back together, and kept it together through a strong and powerful leadership. Now, usually right after it's united, they went through a period of very good rulers, where you had stable government, a prosperous state that usually secures or extended the border. During this period, the rulers would be said to have like the mandate of heaven. Okay, they would have this mandate of heaven. You remember we talked about the mandate of heaven earlier. Okay, and right now they'd be saying in this period where everything is good, good rulers, they had the right to rule, they had the mandate. But as time progressed, what happened is this, is that after a period of success and stability, we went down where leadership started to decline. Wealth concentrates into just a few hands instead of like spread throughout society. Fewer and fewer people have wealth. Now, do that with the problems of the population starting to grow and outstripping the resources. So when you get to this phase in the cycle, what you see is this: you actually see less wealth but more people. And that creates a huge problem, guys, because as your population grows, there's less money there to take care of them. But fewer and fewer people have the money, which leads to civil unrest. Okay, which leads to civil unrest. Now, the civil unrest leads to an uprising, and uprisings usually weaken the empire and usually allow it usually weakens the empire to allow either for foreign invasion or sometimes to allow for a breakup. So the dynasty collapses. Now during this period here, you have a period of weakness. And usually in this period right through here, it's not only a period of weakness, but it's also a period of division where China's broken up into a bunch of smaller kingdoms. But gradually, as we move closer to this way, you'll see that wealth returns. There's increased wealth in the areas. And we see a lower population. Okay? And eventually, one of the kingdoms gets strong enough where it reunites China with force. And then the cycle starts all over again. This cycle is so predominant in Chinese history that even the Chinese scholars at the time recognized, if you read some of their poetry, if you read some of their recent history and stuff, what you see is that they recognize this cycle themselves. And it's a cycle that's repeated over and over. And it's the cycle that I want you to know more as much as I do about individual dynasties. Now, we talked about the Shang dynasty, the Chao dynasty, the Qin. We saw this pattern played out in each of those dynasties. We saw where the dynasty like the Shang started off strong, good inventions, then started growing weaker. And then the Chow, or sometimes pronounced Zhao, come in and overthrow them. Reunite China. They stay strong for a while, then they get weakness, and then the Qin come in. Now, one thing about the Qin, now, when the Qin dynasty occurred, that's when the Europeans first discovered China. So that's where the term China comes from. It's because they discovered China during the Qin dynasty, so they gave the name China. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what happens. How do you go from having good and vigorous rulers to rulers who are not as good, who are weaker? And think about that for a while, okay? One of the reasons this happens is because right after you take something over, you may be more on guard, more attuned. You may be a better leader because you have to. But once you're in power for a couple hundred years, or your family's in power for a couple hundred years, then it may get a little arrogant. They may get less mindful of the way they rule. Okay, and also empires tend to get run down after a while. So one thing we do not see, like we see in Rome, is we don't see 1,000 years of any one particular governing system. We see a bunch of different systems over a long period of time. All right, and there's finally, what is a dynasty? Right, a dynasty is the length of time that a family rules in China. You need to remember that, because if you don't know what dynasty means, then Chinese dynasties don't really make much sense, do they? Well, guys, I thank you for tuning in. I look forward to see you guys in class today. You take care. Bye-bye.